I'm here.
We can hear you, but not see you, Angel.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on my, oh, here, hold on. Geez, this technology is not liking me at the moment.
Okay, your video's on now.
Okay, thank you.
Your video's on now.
Okay, we are recording and we are streaming.
Okay. Special meeting of council for July 6th, 2020 is now in session. Roll call, please.
Council President, Mr. Arcaro,
Present.
Mr. Emery,
Here.
Mr. Gaw,
Here.
Mr. Kozeski,
Here.
Mrs. Ledford,
Here.
Mrs. McVoy,
Here.
Mr. Moiseo,
Here.
City Manager, Mr. Hockaday, and City Manager, Mr. Hockaday.
Jim, your microphone's muted.
As a-
Jim,
You're muted, Jim.
And Finance Director, John Williams.
Here.
Okay, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
Here.
States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one
One
nation,
nation,
under
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll move on to the special meeting topics tonight, which is our ordinances that we were not able to get to at the last meeting. And we have one ordinance in third reading, 4 ordinances in second reading, and 1 ordinance in first reading. So we will begin with the third reading, ordinance 41-20.
An ordinance to authorize the city manager to award the bid and enter into contract with C&K Industrial Services, Inc. for the sewer interceptor cleaning project at the bid price of $63,030 and declaring an emergency.
Okay, as you know, we've discussed this many times. Mr. Hockaday, do you have anything additional you wanted to add?
I don't. So the only thing I would add is I'm getting some terrible feedback on this.
I'm not getting any feedback here. You're muted.
Yep, I resolved the issue. It was
Okay.
that was user error. The YouTube sound was playing in the background because I'm streaming.
Ah,
Have it muted, so I was hearing both feeds. So I apologize.
have to get a hold of the IT guy.
Yeah. Are we still on 4120?
Yes.
Yeah. So no issues here. This was a good bid. I think there was $800 between the 2 lowest bidders. We did. This is for the cleaning of the sewer interceptor line, which is the east of Harbor Street. It kind of parallels the Canadian National property all the way down over the hill, and it leads north to south, ending at the wastewater treatment plant. Most of the line is off the beaten path. There's no roadway, so it needs to be cleaned and inspected, and it hasn't had that done in probably 20 years. So we would like to move forward with this.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions on ordinance 4120? Okay, if not, Mr. Mozia.
I'd like to make a motion to act on ordinance 4120.
There's a motion to act on ordinance 41-20. Is there a second?
You need to declare an emergency.
Declare an emergency.
It's in third reading.
You still have to declare it an emergency for it to go into effect immediately. You just don't have to suspend the 3 reading rule.
Okay.
All right, so we have to declare an emergency. All right, Mr. Arcaro, I'd like to make a motion to declare ordinance 4120.
There's a motion to declare ordinance 41-20 an emergency. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moisia.
Yes.
And Mr. Mozio, the emergency has been declared.
I'd like to make a motion to act on ordinance 41-20.
It's a motion to act on ordinance 41-20. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Kozewski.
Pardon me, Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moisia.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 41-20 is passed. Move on to our second reading ordinances, and we will begin with ordinance 47-20.
An ordinance to create Fund 801 ESID for the purpose of accounting for the receipt and disbursement of special assessments for the special energy improvement projects for the city of Conneaut.
Okay, as you know, we've discussed this numerous times, and it is in second reading. Mr. Hake, do you have anything further? Okay, does council have any questions? Okay, if not, Mr. Emery.
Make a motion to waive the 3 reading rule on ordinance 47-20.
The motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 47-20. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mrs. Ledford.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy. We lost Mrs. McVoy. Nope.
Yes.
And Mr. Moisia.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Emery, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I make a motion to act on ordinance 47-20.
The motion to act on ordinance 47-20. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes. Mr.
Kozewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moisia.
Okay, ordinance 47-20 is passed. Move on to ordinance 48-20.
An ordinance to create Fund 259 Local Coronavirus Relief Fund for the purpose of accounting for the receipt and disbursement of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, CARES Act, funds from the County Coronavirus Relief Distribution Fund.
Okay, again, this is a companion ordinance. Mr. Hockaday, anything further, or Mr. Williams?
I think John just needed authorization to create a new fund to track these receipts.
Okay, does council have any questions? Okay, if not, Mrs. Ledford,
I make a motion to waive the three reading rule on ordinance 4820.
so a motion to suspend the three reading rule on ordinance 48-20. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Mosio.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
yes,
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Hey, Mrs. Ledford, the three reading rule has been suspended.
I would like to act on ordinance 4820.
There's a motion to act on ordinance 48-20. Is there a second?
A second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Emery.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
yes,
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Ordinance 48-20 is passed. Move on to ordinance 49-20.
In ordinance to amend the 2020 budget through appropriations and fund and interfund transfers attached here to and marked Exhibit A.
Okay, Mr. Williams, you have anything to add?
No, I don't, but if you'd like me to go over it again, it's a pretty brief budget amendment, but I can do that, or,
If you
If
just
you'd
want to
like.
refresh.
okay, basically, we're just amending a few line items. One is for the general fund for the police department. We're reappropriating a trade-in for the police department for $7,340. I had to adjust several line items and create a new line item in the State Highway Improvement Fund for the line painting. It was significantly more than last year. We were, I don't know, around 15,000 last year. It's going to be around 28,000 this year. So we had to amend some appropriation line items to account for that. And then there was a reappropriation of a prior year PO to finish the Melick Park project. I know someone had a question last week or last meeting about the detail of what they were supposed to do. I did send that out. It was a more comprehensive estimate of what was to be performed at Melick Park. That is going to be an additional $8,750. There was a $4,000 carryover appropriation. So we will have $12,750 available to complete that project. So the grand total of increases for all funds is $37,090. We had a $5,000 decrease, so the net grand total for all funds is $32,090.
Okay, thank you. Council, have any questions?
Thanks for sending that out, John. I appreciated it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, if not, Mr. Mosio.
I'd like to make a motion to suspend the three reading rule on ordinance 49-20.
So motion to suspend the three reading rule on ordinance 49-20. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Kozowski.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
yes,
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Mr. Mosio, the three reading rule has been suspended.
I'd like to make a motion to act on ordinance 49-20.
There's a motion to act on ordinance 49-20. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mrs. McVoy.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
yes,
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Ordinance 49-20 is passed. Move on to ordinance 50-20.
An ordinance to authorize the city manager to award the bid and enter into contract with Koski Construction Company for the Chestnut Street from Lake Road to 16th Street and Middle Road from Route 20 to the I-90 Bridge resurfacing project at a price not to exceed $549,000 and declaring an emergency.
Okay, Mr. Hockey, do you have anything further to add?
That's pretty descriptive.
Okay, does council have any questions?
Jim, there is one question. How far south does it go?
On Middle?
No. Existing pavement?
No, I believe it goes, yeah, to the bridge.
The pavement goes to the other side of the bridge.
Well, it doesn't include bridge aprons.
Okay.
So bridge aprons are part of the bridge.
All right, okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, if not, Mrs. Ledford,
At this time, I'd like to suspend the three reading rule on ordinance 5020.
have to declare first.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'd like to declare an emergency on ordinance 5020.
Okay, there's a motion to declare ordinance 50-20 an emergency. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Emery.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moisia.
Hey, Mrs. Ledford, the emergency has been declared.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to suspend the three reading rule on ordinance 5020.
There's a motion to suspend the three reading rule on ordinance 50-20. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mrs. McBoy.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moisia.
Yes.
Hey, Mrs. Ledford, the three reading rule has been suspended.
This time, I'd like to motion to act on ordinance 50-20.
It's a motion to act on ordinance 50-20. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goff.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McBoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moisia.
Yes.
Ordinance 50-20 is passed. Move on to our first reading ordinance 51-20.
An ordinance to authorize the city manager to award the bid and enter into contract with USI Insurance Services for the city of Conneaut's general liability insurance at the bid price of $70,481 and declaring it an emergency.
Okay, Mr. Hockaday.
So as we discussed during our work session, as well as the materials that I sent out last week, we did a formal bid process for insurance coverage this year because we had multiple brokers interested in submitting prices. In general, the traditional insurance prices were not competitive with the pool prices, and we are recommending that Conneaut move to the public entity pool. In general, it's about a savings of about $25,000 over the next nearest insurance product. There are some name difference between the entity pool and a traditional insurance broker product. We've gone over those, what it takes, and I think it's positive in most regards. And I think John and I are unanimous in recommending that we do the public entity pool. As such, council has to authorize that change to the pool. So that's what we're requesting, and it does save us about $25,000 over the next nearest product.
And it's basically the same or enhanced coverage.
Yeah, in most cases, it's actually stronger coverage.
Very good. Okay, does council have any questions?
I just have one question. You had mentioned something about adding maybe some extra cyber insurance. Now, do you have a ballpark of how much that would be, or are we actively going to do that? That would add to this?
So We could add that, and I believe, John, if you got the number right in front of you, I want to say it's like $2,300 to go from $250,000 in cyber coverage to $1 million in aggregate cyber coverage. That is something I would recommend we do.
It's $2,680 more. So
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion. There's a motion to declare ordinance 41-20 an emergency. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Mosio.
Who motioned? I couldn't hear. I'm sorry.
Mr. Kozeski, motion.
Thank you. Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozeski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes,
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Mr. Kozeski, the emergency has been declared.
Make a motion to waive the 3 reading rule.
There's a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 51-20. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mrs. McVoy.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozeski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Kozeski.
We act on ordinance 51.
There's a motion to act on ordinance 51-20. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Emery.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozeski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
yes,
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 51-20 is passed. Now move on to unfinished and old business. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to miscellaneous business.
About the fireworks, we do have, we're not allowed to run at all fireworks in the city of Conneaut. Is this correct?
In,
Say that again?
Fireworks in Conneaut. The local people shooting off fireworks.
that's correct, in the whole state.
Okay. Just that it was quite, last night was really bad. Worse than the 4th.
In my area, it's been for a week.
I guess we should call the police.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
President Arcaro, did you want to talk about the judgment entry from Judge Irochi?
Yes, I was just going to ask you if you wanted to say a few things about that.
Okay. So we received a judgment entry this evening from Judge Irochi regarding some of the changes that we're making as we reopen City Hall. Obviously, the courts have been open to business. There are some different challenges between the courts and the municipal offices. Obviously, we're approaching the deadline for local income tax. We have met with Michelle, our health department director here in Conneaut, Michelle Blood, and we have come up with a plan that she has helped us develop as well as inspected and improved for properly spacing people that are coming into City Hall. Obviously, that requires that we limit the number of people who can come up to the second floor and wait in line at a single time. This is going to require us to maintain a presence in the lobby and keep track of how many people are going to which offices. The other real space challenge with the courts is the courtroom is one big room in which social distancing is not always possible, and therefore masks will always be required in the court. In City Hall, it is strongly encouraged that all residents wear a mask when entering City Hall, though we cannot require it. You must be social distanced. If you are not, something will be said. To that end, the court has requested that they establish and maintain their security presence in the lobby. This will allow us to relieve the firefighters that are down there, but it will also add their security protocol upon entry to City Hall. The court and the city's weapons rules are the same for handbags, purses, so on and so forth, may be screened or checked for any weapons, guns, knives, etc. Before entering the upstairs of City Hall. So Judge Irochi and I have talked about this and we are on the same page. This does represent a unanticipated expenditure in having to count the number of people that are visiting various offices. This is not something we anticipated for, and we believe the requirement of relief under the CARES Act funding. So council may have to take further action later in terms of appropriation for some of these activities. As soon as we are able to onboard some individuals down in the court, and I know the court is seeking APATA certified folks that are able to carry a weapon to staff that lobby area, as well as acquire a walk-through metal detector. Right now, they are the only court in the state of, in Ashtabula County that does not have pre-screening on that level. So it's a move they've needed to make for a while as well. So I think it's just something that we need to do. Myself and Judge Irochi are in agreement. So we are going to begin to take steps towards that end to relieve the issues with coronavirus and social distancing, as well as City Hall security, and deal with it at this time. So I just wanted to make you aware of that, that is our intent to move forward with those steps, and it should come as some welcome relief to the fire department, because they've been adding additional staff to help with screening throughout the day and juggle employees and things as they come and go. So I appreciate the cooperation from Judge Irochi as well. I'm happy to answer questions.
Yes, absolutely. This is something that, as far as the security goes, that I've been advocating for since 2002. And I'm glad that, and I applaud Judge Irochi for taking this step, and I really appreciate his efforts to finally address our security problems here in City Hall.
Mr. Hockaday, I understand too, he's also going to be purchasing a magnetometer. So one,
Yes.
then look at a magnetometer down the road.
Yes, so there's going to be a walkthrough metal detector. They do have wands, and they presently wand people downstairs right now because it's the only point of entry at which we can do it. Yes, he's in the process of acquiring that, and he can utilize his already appropriated funds in his 214 account to do that.
Anybody have any questions on the judge's order?
It sounds very good.
Council, the order itself, I do have copies, which I will place in your mailboxes that the judge provided.
Good, thank you.
Any other miscellaneous business?
One bit of, on the east side with NS Railroad, because they've made their changes in their structure, we're having a problem with one road crossing in general, sometimes being blocked longer. I'd like to see up the fines to make them think about when they do it, and at least try to talk to the train master. He won't talk to me now, to see if we can at least give these people a heads up when they're going to be blocked in. It's how they changed. They went from 1.5 miles to 2.5 mile long trains. So now they're blocking a lot more crossings. We need to work on this. look at the law, see if we can somehow improve it, make the fine heavier so they'll respond. That's the only other thing I have. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. God, did you have a specific crossing?
Woodworth.
Okay, well, I will add Gore Road to that.
Oh, they're getting Gore on the other end?
They
Okay.
most certainly are. And this topic has been on my radar, just haven't been able to bring it up. So I appreciate you doing that.
So,
I
so
think we
that,
need to address the fines as well.
so that tells you how long that train is, if it's blocking basically from one end of town to the other.
Yeah, it's really bad on the Gore Road crossing. I've received many complaints and witnessed it myself on multiple occasions.
Right.
Mr. Hockaday, perhaps you can drop that on the law director as well to take a look at our ordinance, see if we can beef it.
I'll see if there's anything we can do with the law director's office. And then I think we can do two other things. I think we can file a PUCO rail complaint if it's a persistent problem. Certainly with Woodworth, where there is literally no other entry except for cross private property belonging to Canadian National, there is no way to access anything north of that. Gore Road, yes, terribly inconvenient for residents, really inconvenient for the manufacturers that sit on that side in terms of getting their just-in-time trucking out and on schedule. But there is a federal complaint process and a state PUCO rail process, and we can do both of those right now. So what I do need, though, is I do need a day and a time. If somebody could snap a photo, if there's some kind of documentation record that I can fall back on when this happens, you can even call me and I will get it documented, because I want to add those specific issues in there. Every PUCO railroad filing is reviewed by the Ohio Rail Development Commission, as well as a special division of the PUCO regarding railroads. I've had good luck in the past resolving issues with railroads through this process. It at least gets their attention.
Yes, agreed. As far as your documentation goes, and so council's aware, if you get complaints from the citizenry, have them contact the police department, file a complaint. Our ordinance says no longer than 5 minutes. The police will send a unit out to make the observation, document the engine number. They can actually issue a citation, which is done in the past. And that's, I think, where we need to beef up, perhaps hitting them in the pocketbook as well as with a PUCO complaint.
If people call, we respond to it. We do the report. We write the fine if we can get the train number and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
They have done that. And it was last year, got them in the process of the police department actually just going ahead and submitting the federal blocked rail crossing filing every time it happened. So make sure that whatever citizens you're talking to know that they need to call the police department. It's not just something that happens and it's inconvenient. If they're not supposed to be doing it, they're not supposed to be doing it. Please report them and we will handle it.
Absolutely. It is definitely a safety issue as well. So.
Yeah, right.
When you find out about the process or have an update, could you please forward it to me, Mr. Hockaday?
Sure. And so the process already exists. So if they call the police department, a report will be made. It'll go through there. It already goes down to the law office. I'll get you the information regarding if there's something we can do to modify or increase the fines. And then we can always do the secondary PUCO rail filing, particularly since you're saying it's one, it's not just, PSX, CN, NS all doing it. It seems to be that the NS is particularly a problem. That's what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Yes, but it's very hard for somebody to catch the head end number
Sure.
when it's at Gore Road and the rear end's at Woodworth. You know. Thank you.
Okay, any other miscellaneous business? Mr. Hockaday, I do have one thing. Received a couple complaints regarding Broad Street between Jackson and State Street. As you know, we're looking to hopefully get that corrected sometime. But since we didn't have the Soapbox Derby this year, the potholes are really bad. So if we could have PW take a look at all the holes there in that area.
Yes, I can forward that to Joe.
Okay, thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mrs. McVoy. Is there a second?
I
Second by Mr. Mozio. Second by Mr. Mozio.
It didn't click. Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Gah,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mrs. McVoy,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo.
His special meeting for July 6th is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.